The wolves had guarded an empty chair for 40 winters, and on the night the storm came off the gray water, one of them finally moved. I was watching from the high table when it happened. Vesgard's hall was crowded that night. The whole harbor had come in out of the weather. Fishers and rope makers and salt cutters packed shoulder to shoulder down the long benches, steam rising off their wet wool, the fires roaring in 3 hearths and still not warm enough. And at my left hand, as it had every night of my reign and my father's reign before it, stood the chair. Black oak, plain. No cushion, no carving, no crest. 2 gray wolves lay in front of it with their heads on their paws, and the space around it was as empty as a grave, because in 40 winters not one living soul in this hold had ever been permitted to sit in it. Not because it was forbidden. There was no law, there was no proclamation. There was simply the fact that when a man came near that chair, the wolves rose slow, without a sound, without a snarl, and the man stopped. Everyone stopped. My own father had reached for the back of it once when I was a boy, and Gert and Ilse had come to their feet and looked at him, and he had taken his hand away and never spoken of it again. I had asked when I was young enough to think asking was the same as being answered. Why the chair? It has always been there. Why do they guard it? They have always guarded it. Whose is it? And there my father had gone quiet, in the way that a man goes quiet when he has been asked a question. He thought he was the only one to have noticed. So it stood, 40 winters, a chair with nobody in it and 2 wolves who would not let anyone near, and a hold that had learned not to look at it. The storm was in its 2nd hour when the steward came up the hall to me, wringing his hands the way he did. "There's a woman at the winter gate, my king." "In this?" "Selling charts." He said the word the way another man would say lice. "A map seller. She has a case on her back and no pack and no kin, and she says she has come from the drowned coast. I have told her the hold does not buy charts from strangers." "You have told her," I set down my cup, "in a storm." He had the grace to shift his feet. "She is standing under the arch. She will not go and she will not come in. She says she will not enter a hall she has not been invited into." Something in that made me want to see her. "Invite her," I said. "Understand what I am so that you understand what happened next. I am Torvald of Vesgard, and I have never in my life been lost. Not once. Put me blindfolded on a boat in white fog with the sun gone and the stars gone and the compass drowned, and I will tell you where north is and I will be right. My father called it a king's instinct. The old women on the rope walk called it moon blessing. I have never called it anything, because a man does not name the hand he was born with. I simply always know the way. Every road in my head lies flat and clear, and I walk it. I have never been lost, and I have never been surprised. 41 years old, and no woman's face had ever once stopped me mid-step. My counsel had brought me daughters of every hold on the gray water, and I had been courteous to all of them and moved by none, and I had made my peace with a cold bed and a warm kingdom. That was the shape of me. That was the whole shape of me. She came in out of the rain. She was not what the steward's face had promised. She was tall and soaked through, and perhaps 30, with dark hair plastered flat, and a leather case slung across her back that she had wrapped in 3 oilskins and her own cloak besides, so that she was drenched to the bone and the case was dry. That was the first thing I ever knew about her. She had given her cloak to a box. She stopped inside the doors and pushed the wet hair off her face with the back of her wrist, because her hands were black with ink to the 2nd knuckle, and she did not want it on her cheek. She looked down the hall at the fires, at the 100 faces turning, at the high table at me, and she did not bow, and she did not flinch, and she did not perform the little bob of humility that strangers perform in a king's hall. She simply looked, taking the measure of the room, the way you would look at a coastline you meant to draw. "You are wet," I said. "It is raining," she said. Somebody down the benches laughed and turned it into a cough. "Come to the fire." "I have nothing to sell you," she said it flatly, without apology, as if getting a lie out of the way early. "Your steward has told me the hold does not buy charts. I am not here to argue with him. I am here because the road out is under 2 feet of water and I would rather not drown in it. When the storm goes, I go. I will pay for the floor I stand on. Nobody pays for my floor. Then I will sit on it and owe you, she said, and I do not like to owe. I should have laughed. I did not. There was something happening in my chest that I had no word for and no map of, and I did not like it, and I could not stop it. She crossed toward the nearest hearth. The benches were full. The whole harbor was in that hall, packed hip to hip, and she went along the length of them looking for a hand's width of space and finding none, and she was too proud to ask a man to move. And then she came to the empty place. I saw it happen the way you see a stone leave a hand, that clear, that slow. She came up the flank of the high table where the crowd thinned, and there was the chair, black and bare, with its ring of empty floor around it and Gert and Ilse lying before it, and she was cold and tired and she did not know. How could she know? She had been in this hold 11 heartbeats. Nobody had told her. Nobody in Vestgard would have needed telling. The hall saw her going toward it. 100 people saw. And the hall did the thing a hall does. It went silent all at once, in a great soft collapse like a sail losing wind. Somebody's cup rang on the boards. The steward made a sound like a man watching a child walk onto ice. She heard the silence. She stopped and looked around at all of us, and she frowned and she said to me, since I was the nearest thing to an answer, is it someone's? And I could not answer her. 40 winters and I did not have an answer. Is it someone's? The simplest question in the world, and it went into me like a knife going into a seam nobody knew was there. Whose is it? Who has it been for? Who has this hold been keeping a place for every night for 40 years, while pretending not to notice it was keeping a place at all? Sit down, I said. My own voice sounded strange to me. The steward said, my king. Sit down, I said again, and she did. She sat in the chair as though it were a chair. That is what undid me, that she did it with no ceremony at all. She dropped into it the way a tired person drops into any seat that will hold her, and she leaned forward and began unwrapping the oilskins from the case with her back bent, and her ink-stained fingers working the knots, absolutely absorbed, absolutely unaware that 400 people had stopped breathing. And my wolves, Gert, who had put the fear of the moon into 3 grown men that spring, Ilse, who had never once let me touch her ears, my wolves stood up. The whole hall drew back. Somebody said her name, no, said a name, said, look out, girl, but she was busy with a knot. Gert walked to the chair. He put his great gray head down into her lap, in among the oilskins, and he sighed a huge, ragged, whole-body sigh. The sigh of an old soldier setting down a pack he has carried so long he has forgotten it is heavy, and he lay down across her feet. Ilse lay down on the other side. And the roaring in the hall, and the roaring under my own ribs, and the whole grinding 40-year noise of a place waiting for something it could not name, went out. Not quietened, went out, like a candle, like a hand cupped over a flame. The woman looked up from the knot and found 400 faces staring at her and 2 wolves pinning her boots to the floor, and she said, with real bewilderment, have I done something? No, I said, and I could barely get it out. No, you have not. Her name was Morena, and she made maps, and she had made them badly for 6 years and well for 11, and she said this the way another woman would say she had 2 sisters. I could not leave the hall. I told myself it was the storm. It was not the storm. I sat at that high table long after the meat was cleared and the harbor folk had bedded down in the straw along the walls, and I watched a stranger unroll charts on the boards at my left hand, and I could not have moved if the sea had come through the door. She had a great many of them. Sea charts mostly, of the gray water and the drowned coast beyond it, drawn on hide, and on that pale reed paper the southern traders bring. And she showed them to me because I asked, and because I understood this later, and it took me a long time because nobody in 11 years had ever asked. Men bought her charts. Men haggled over her charts. Nobody sat down and said, tell me about this one. "This is the shoal at Kettleness," she said, turning a hide toward me and smoothing it with the flat of her hand. "Everyone draws it wrong. Everyone copies the wrong from the man before. They draw it as one bank." Her finger traced. "It is two, and there is a gut between them a hand's breadth deeper than the water on either side. And if you are in it in fog and you do not know, you will feel yourself in deep water and be very calm and very pleased, and you will be dead in the length of a psalm." "How do you know it is two?" I went and looked. "In fog. In summer in a rowing boat with a lead line and a great deal of time." She shrugged. "It is not clever, it is only slow. Everybody wants to be clever, nobody wants to be slow." I asked her, I do not know why, except that I wanted to keep her talking, and I have never in my life wanted to keep anyone talking. How a woman came to a trade like that with no house behind her. She was quiet a moment. "My grandmother drew," she said, "and my mother did not, and I did. It skips." She rolled the hide with quick, practiced hands. "That is all." "And your grandmother's name?" "Is nothing to anyone." She said it without bitterness, which was somehow worse. "She is not in any book. I have looked. I looked for a long time when I was young enough to think that finding her name in a book would mean something." Gert's head was on her feet. He had not moved in 3 hours. "Your wolves are strange," she said. "Yes." "Are they always?" "No," I said, "never." She looked down at the great gray head, and she reached out, and I nearly spoke, nearly said don't, because Ilse had drawn blood from a marshal's hand for less, and she scratched the base of Gert's ear with 2 ink-black fingers. His tail thumped the floor once, like a dropped log. "He is old," she said softly. "Look at his muzzle, he is very old." 14 winters. "And the chair," she glanced at the arm of it, at the black oak, at the ring of floor around her that nobody had crossed all night because nobody would. She was not stupid. She had felt the room. "What is the chair, my king?" "I don't know," I said. And that was the first true thing I had said aloud in Vestgard in a very long time. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark listening to the storm chew the shutters, and I went looking in my head for the road that would take me away from her, and there was none. Every road in my skull, and I have thousands, and they all lie flat and clear, and I walk them the way another man walks a floor, every one of them now bent, turned, ran, like water finding the lowest ground, toward the small guest chamber at the end of the north gallery, where a map seller was sleeping with a dry leather case beside her and 2 wolves lying across her door. I have never been lost. I got up at some black hour, and I found that I could not know exactly where she was, not roughly, not somewhere in the north gallery. I knew it the way I know north, bone deep, unarguable, a needle sitting down. 14 paces turned the second door. She was breathing. She was there. I stood in the corridor in the dark like a fool, and I understood, with a cold, clear horror, what had happened to me. I had a gift for never being lost, and it had spent 41 years pointing at nothing at all faithfully, the way a compass points at north whether or not there is anyone alive to read it. And now something had come into the room, and the needle had swung, and every road I had, every road I would ever have, went to one door. That was the bond for me, not thunder, not a mark burning, not a beast rising in my chest. Just this, a man who could never be lost, discovering that from now on he would always, always know the way to one particular person, and that there was nothing in the world he could do about it, and that he did not want to do anything about it. I went back to my chamber and sat on the edge of the bed until the shutters went gray. In the morning the road out was still under water, and I took her to the chart room. I told myself it was courtesy. It was not courtesy. I wanted to see her face when she saw it, the way you want to give a gift. Vestgard's chart room is under the west stair, a long, low stone room that smells of vellum and cold and lamp oil, with the Hold's maps racked in cedar to the ceiling, 400 years of them. And on the great table in the middle, chained at all 4 corners to iron rings sunk in the wood, lies the road map. It is the oldest thing we own. It is older than the hall. It is a great sheet of hide, brown as tea now, and on it is drawn the road our people walked when they came here, the road out of the burning north, when the old holds went up and the ice went bad and the whole people came down the coast in a stumbling column of carts and hungry children and dying wolves. 900 souls set out. 600 arrived. And they arrived because someone had drawn them a way through the marsh flats where the pursuing packs could not follow, through the tide gut at Vesgard Head that could be crossed for 1 hour in 12, and would swallow anything that tried it in the other 11. That map is why we exist. Every child in this hold is walked down here at 7 years old and shown it and told. These lines are why you are alive. Marina stopped in the doorway. She did not go to it. She stood with one hand on the frame and she looked, and something went across her face that I did not have a name for, and I have thought about that look every day since. It was not wonder. It was the look of a woman hearing a voice she knew in a crowded street. "May I?" she said. "Yes." She went to the table slowly. She did not touch it. She put her hands behind her back like a child taught not to touch, and she bent over the hide from 6 inches away and she went along it, left to right, the whole length of the wall of it, and she was breathing very carefully. I watched her instead of the map. 20 minutes, half an hour. The lamp guttered and I trimmed it and she did not notice. At the tide gut she stopped a long time. At the marsh flats she stopped longer. Then she said in a strange voice, "Who scraped it?" "What?" "This." She pointed, not touching, an inch off the hide at the bottom corner where there is a band of empty brown space below the tide gut. Every child in Vesgard knows that corner. It is nothing. It is the edge of the map. Someone has taken a knife to this. Look at the nap of the skin. It's flattened. It's been scraped and burnished and it has taken the ink out, but it has not taken the tooth out. See how the light lies differently across it than it does there and there. She straightened up. Her face had gone the color of the vellum. There was writing here. Somebody has removed it. That is the edge of the map. That is where the drawer signs it, she said. And the cold came down my back like water off a roof. Bring the lamp round, she said to me, to her king, without a thought, the way you speak to another pair of hands. I brought the lamp round. She took it and got down until her cheek was almost on the table, and she held the flame low and flat so that its light ran along the surface of the hide instead of falling on it, and the whole corner leapt into shadow and relief. And there, ghosts, the ghosts of letters, scraped out, burnished flat, 400 years old and still in raking light, sitting there in the skin like footprints in a floor. I could not read them, she could. She read them for a long time without speaking. And then she set the lamp down very carefully, because her hands were not steady, and she stood up and she said, "It is a woman's name." The scraping had taken the letters, it had not taken the hand. That is what she told me, standing in that cold room with her ink-black fingers pressed flat on the table on either side of the chained hide, speaking faster than I could follow, and then slower, forcing herself slower, walking me through it the way you walk a man through a proof he does not want. "A hand is a hand," she said. "You cannot scrape a hand out. Look here, the tide gut. See how the drawer has done the water. Little hook strokes all leaning the same way like a field of barley. Now look at the marsh flats. Same hooks, same lean. One hand drew all of this start to finish, and that hand is—" She stopped. She put her fist against her mouth for a moment. "That hand is my grandmother's grandmother's or her mother's or hers. I do not know how far back, but it is my line's hand. I have 4 of her charts in that case. I have had them since I was 9 years old, and I have copied those hooks 10,000 times because that is how you learn, you copy. And I would know that water anywhere on this earth." "Marina." "My king, I am not mistaken. I did not say you were. Everyone says I am. Everyone has always." She stopped again. She took a breath. "There was a name in that corner and someone cut it out, and then somebody else. Look at the ink here at the bottom. This is a later ink. This is not even the same century. Somebody else wrote this. And she pointed, and I bent, and I read the line that every child in this hold is taught before they are taught their letters. The line under the road map. The line I had been shown at 7 years old. Drawn by the hand of Aldrich Vesgard, who brought his people through. Aldrich Vesgard, the First Lord, my blood, the man in the great window over the hall with his arm out and the column behind him. 300 children in this hold have been named for him. There is a stone of him at the harbor mouth with his hand on the chart. He did not draw it, she said. Marina. He did not draw it. Whoever drew this map went out into the marsh with a lead line and did it slowly. And Aldrich Vesgard was leading 900 starving people down a coast in winter, and he did not have a summer to spend in a rowing boat. And no man on this earth draws water like a field of barley the first time he picks up a pen. She was shaking. Somebody drew him a road. He walked it, and then somebody scraped her off the bottom of it. I want to tell you that I defended my house. That is what a king does. That is what 41 years of being Torvald of Vesgard had built into me like a keel. I did not. I stood in that cold room and looked at the raking light on the ghost of a woman's name, and I thought about a black oak chair at my left hand that 2 wolves had guarded for 40 winters, and that 400 people had learned not to look at, and I heard my father's silence again, the exact texture of it, the silence of a man who has been asked something he hoped nobody had noticed. Is it someone's? Say the name, I said. She said it. It was long and northern, and it does not matter what it was, it matters that she said it aloud in that room, the first time it had been said aloud in Vesgard in 400 years, and that when she said it Gert, lying in the doorway with his chin on the sill, lifted his head. Old Sarek came down to the chart room before the noon bell, which told me everything, because Sarek had not come down a stair unasked in 10 years. He was the hold's chronicler, and his father had been, and his father's father. 81 years old, straight as a spar, with hands like folded paper and a voice you had to lean toward, which was a trick, and everybody knew it was a trick, and everybody leaned anyway. He had advised my father. He had advised my grandfather. When I was 6, he had taught me my letters. And when I was 16 and stupid, he had taken me apart in front of the council so gently that I did not understand I had been destroyed until I was in bed that night. I loved him, understand that. I loved him the way you love the man who taught you your letters. My king. He looked at Marina. He looked at the lamp lying on its side where she had set it. He looked at the raking light on the corner of the hide, and I watched him see it, and I watched him decide not to have seen it. The hall says you brought a chart seller down to the road map. I did. That map is chained. It is. It is chained, he said, because it is the only one there is, and because when a thing is the only one there is, a great many people become very interested in touching it. Still gentle. Still that voice you had to lean for. What has she told you? Ask her, I said. She is standing here. That checked him. Only for a heartbeat, but I saw it, and I had known him 50 years and I had never seen it. Very well. He turned to her with a courtesy so perfect it was an insult. What have you told him, child? Marina did not flinch and did not raise her voice. That the signature has been scraped off the bottom of your road map, she said, and a false one written under it 200 years later, and that the hand that drew the map is a woman's, and that the woman is my kin. Sarek smiled. Of course, he said. And that was all he said. Just those 2 words, laid down as softly as a coin on a table. I felt the room turn. I felt it go from a chart room with 3 people in it to a courtroom with a woman in the dock. And he did it with 2 words, and he did it without raising his voice. And he did it because he had spent 60 years learning exactly how much weight a room will put on a thing, an old man says gently. A map seller with no kin, he said to me, not to her, comes to a hold in a storm, is shown its most precious thing, and discovers within the hour that it belongs to her family. My king, I have been chronicler here for 51 years. I have had 9 of these. 9. There was a man in your father's time who was the lost heir of the drowned coast, and he had documents, and he wept in the hall, and he was very convincing. And he cost this hold 300 silver before he went over the north wall in the night. He turned his old, kind, terrible face to her. Where would you like the money sent, child? I have not asked you for anything, Marina said. No, said Sarek, not yet, that is how it is done well. I saw her hands close. And I saw in that moment the whole architecture of it, how it would go, how it had always gone in every hall for every woman like her. She would be shown out, kindly. There would be a coin pressed on her at the gate which she would refuse, and the refusing would be recounted as cunning. And in a month the hold would tell the story of the map seller who tried it on, and in a year it would be a joke on the rope walk, and the scraped corner of the road map would go back to being the edge of the map, and my father's silence would become my silence, and I would sit for the rest of my life beside a chair I could not explain with two wolves in front of it, and I would learn, as he had learned, not to look. Sarek, I said. My king. Who was the chronicler, I said, 200 years ago, when that later ink went on. The room got very quiet. He did not answer at once. That was all. He was too old and too good to blanch or bluster. He simply did not answer at once, and I had known him 50 years, and I had never once in 50 years asked him a question he did not answer at once. Sarek, he said at last. Your line. My line has kept this hold's memory since there was a hold. His chin came up, and for the first time his voice was not gentle. We wrote it down. When there was famine, we wrote it down. When there was plague, when your great-grandfather lost the fleet, we wrote it down, and it is because we wrote it down that you know who you are. Do not stand in my chart-room, boy, and use that tone with me about a scraped corner. Boy. He had not called me that since I was one. And I looked at him, my teacher, the man who taught me my letters, straight as a spar at 81 with his hands folded, and I understood that he knew. Not that he had done it. He had not done it. It was 400 years old and 200 years old, and he had been nowhere near it. But he knew. He had known for 51 years. He had come down that stair the moment he heard, because he had been waiting his whole life for someone to bring a lamp into that corner, and he had come to put it out. You knew about the chair, I said. There is no chair, said Sarek. There is a chair at my left hand and two wolves in front of it, and it has been empty for 40 winters, and my father would not tell me why. Your father, said Sarek, was a wise man and knew what a hold can carry. And that of everything was the thing that broke it in me. What a hold can carry, 400 years of it. A woman scrapes out a road in the marsh with a lead line in a rowing boat, and 600 people walk it out of the fire and live, and their grandchildren's grandchildren build a hall on the strength of it, and somewhere in the long, warm middle of that, a man with a good hand and a bad heart decided that the story went down better with a lord in it. And every chronicler since has known, and everyone has looked at the ledger of what a hold can carry and has decided, gently, kindly, with the best intentions in the world, that it could not carry her. And the wolves, 400 years, and the wolves remembered. The one thing in Vesgard nobody had been able to edit. Get out of my chart room, I said. Marina wanted to leave that night, and the road was still under water, and she tried anyway. I found her at the winter gate at dusk, with the case on her back, and the rain coming sideways under the arch, arguing with a gate boy who did not have the rank to stop her, and did not have the heart to let her go. Marina. Don't. She did not turn round. Please don't. I know how this goes. I have had this exact conversation in 4 holds, and it always goes the same way, and I would rather do it in the rain than in the hall. How does it go? The king believes me for 1 day, she said, and then the old man talks to him for a week, and then there is a very kind letter. She hitched the case up on her shoulder. I am not angry. I want you to understand that I am not angry with you. I only don't want to be here for the letter. Sit in the chair, I said. She turned round then. What? Tonight, at supper, sit in the chair at my left hand in front of the whole hold. The rain was coming through the arch and neither of us moved out of it. Not because I believe you, because I do not know, and neither do you, not for certain, not yet, not in a way a hold will carry. But my wolves have kept that seat empty for 40 winters, and their mothers kept it before them, and Sarek's line has been scraping at your grandmother for 200 years, and I would like once before I die for something in this hold to be decided by the evidence. I heard my own voice go rough. You said it yourself. Everyone wants to be clever. Nobody wants to be slow. Be slow. Stay a week. Read the racks. There are 400 years of charts down there, and Sarek has read every one of them, and you have read none. And I would very much like to see what happens when someone reads them who knows what a woman's water looks like. She stood in the rain with the case digging into her shoulder. And if I find nothing, then you will have found nothing, I said, and you will go, and I will send no letter, and I will stand at that gate myself and thank you. And if I find something, then we will have a very bad month, I said, and I will not enjoy it, and we will do it anyway. She looked at me for a long moment, with the rain running off her jaw. That is not what kings do, she said. No, I said, I have noticed. She stayed. She read for 9 days. I have never seen anything like it in my life. She had them bring the racks down, and she went through 400 years of Vesgard's charts on her knees on the flagstones with a lamp at her elbow. And she did not go up for meals, so I sent them down, and she did not eat them. So I went down and sat on the floor against the cedar with a bowl in my hands until she ate. We did not talk much. Sometimes she would hold a hide up over her head against the lamp and say, "Look," and I would look and see nothing, and she would show me, and then I would see it, and the seeing would go through me like a bell. That was when I learned what she was. Not the drowned line, not the hidden hand, what she was. A woman who could look at a scratch on a piece of skin and tell you the weather on the day it was made. Who found on the 4th day that the tide gut on the road map was drawn with a correction in it. A first line wrong, then scraped by the drawer herself and redrawn a finger's width east, and who sat back on her heels in the lamplight with her ink-black hands on her knees and said, in a voice I will hear until I die. She got it wrong the first time. Does that hurt it? It makes it. She was almost crying, and she was smiling, and she did not notice she was doing either. A forger does not draw a mistake. A forger draws it perfect because he is copying something that is already finished. She went out there and she got it wrong, and people would have drowned, and she went back and did it again. She pressed her hand flat over the correction, over the 400-year-old scrape, and she said, "Hello." I had to leave the room. I stood in the cold passage outside with my forehead on the stone and my heart going like a hammer, and every road in my skull, everyone, bending toward a woman kneeling on a floor saying hello to a dead grandmother's mistake, and I gave up. That is the plain word for it. I gave up. I had been fighting it for 9 days the way a man fights sleep, and I stood in that passage and I put it down. On the 7th day, she found the ledger. Not a chart. A ledger, a mean little book of accounts from 200 years back, the sort of thing no chronicler bothers to cull because no chronicler imagines anyone will read it. Payments. Fish, rope, tar, wax, and on a page in the 2nd winter in a chronicler's hand. To the burnishing and relettering of the road map, and for the silence of the same, 6 silver. And for the silence of the same. He had written it down. That was the thing. He had scraped a woman off the founding document of an entire people, and he had put it on the accounts, because he was a chronicler and chroniclers write things down, and it had never once occurred to him in his whole life that anyone would ever go looking in the fish and the tar. Morena brought it to me in the chart room, and set it on the table, and did not say anything at all. We stood there a long time. "Sarek does not know this exists," I said at last. "No. He would have burned it." "He would have burned it," she agreed, 200 years ago if his great-great-grandfather had had any imagination. She closed the ledger gently. They never think anybody will read the boring parts. That is the whole of my trade, my king. Everybody wants to be clever. Nobody wants to be slow, I said. And she looked up at me, and something in her face changed, the first crack in 9 days, and she said very quietly, "You remembered that." "Morena," I said, "I remember everything you have ever said to me." She put her hand flat on the table between us, ink to the second knuckle. I did not take it. Not then. I want to be very clear about that, because I have had a long life and I have watched a great many powerful men take things they were not offered and call it destiny. I stood on the other side of that table with my hands at my sides and my heart going like the sea, and I did not take her hand, and she left it there, and neither of us moved, and I have never been happier in my life than I was in that cold room not touching a woman's hand. "There will have to be a reading," I said. I called the hold on the 9th night. Every soul in Vesgard came. The hall could not hold them. They stood in the doors and along the gallery and out into the wet yard, and the harbor folk came up from the rope walks in their working clothes, because word had gone through the town the way it does, sideways, in 3 hours, and what the word said was, "The king is going to unchain the map." I had them bring the road map up. 4 men carried it. They set it on trestles in the middle of the floor with the hearths blazing on either side, and 400 years came into that room and lay down flat, and the whole hall went quiet the way a hall does that soft collapse, that sail losing wind. Sarek stood at the foot of the table with his hands folded. He had not spoken to me in 9 days. I did not make a speech. Kings make speeches, and speeches are how a thing gets decided by the loudest man in the room, and I had told her it would be decided by the evidence. "Morena," I said, "read it to them." She came out into the middle of the floor with the lamp. She was afraid. I could see it, and so could everyone. Her hands were not steady, and she was a stranger in a hall of 400 people who had every reason to want her to be a liar, because if she was not a liar then their founder was, and their chronicler's line was, and the stone at the harbor mouth was. She set the lamp down on the trestle, and then she did the thing she does, she stopped being afraid, all at once, because she had work. "You must all come close," she said. "You cannot see this from where you are, and I will not have anyone say afterwards that they could not see." And Vesgard came close. The whole hold, crowding in around the table, fishers with their caps in their hands, children up on shoulders, the council in a rank at the far end with their faces like weather. She showed them the water, the little hooked strokes leaning like barley. She held one of her own grandmother's charts beside it and let them look and let them look, and a rope-maker's wife said "oh" in the silence, quite loudly, and put her hand over her mouth. She showed them the correction at the tide gut, the wrong line, scraped and redrawn a finger's width east, and she said, "Whoever drew this went out into that gut and got it wrong, and someone would have died," and she went back. She took the lamp and laid it flat and ran the light along the corner, and 400 people saw the ghosts of the letters come up out of the skin like footprints in a floor, and they made a sound I have never heard a crowd make before or since. And then she read the ledger, fish, rope, tar, wax, to the burnishing and relettering of the road map, and for the silence of the same, 6 silver. Nobody moved. Sarek lifted his head. He was very old and very straight, and his hands were folded, and he was not going to run, and there was something in it. I will say this for him, and I have hated myself for it since. There was something in it a man could not help but respect. "My king," he said into the silence, "may an old man speak?" "Speak. You are about to take 400 years from these people," he said, "and give them a stranger. I am about to give them the truth. They cannot eat it." He turned slowly to the hall, to his hall in a sense, more than it had ever been mine, because he had written every word of what it thought it was. Every one of you was walked down that stair at 7 years old and shown that map and told, "These lines are why you are alive," and you were told a man drew them. And you have gone out in bad weather and come home in worse, and you have buried children, and you have stood on that harbor wall in the dark, and some of you have been very frightened, and you have looked at that stone at the harbor mouth with his hand on the chart, and it has been a comfort to you. His old voice cracked and did not break. That is what I have kept, not a lie, a comfort. And this man, whom I taught his letters, is about to take it off you tonight and hand you an ink-stained girl in its place, and he will call it justice, and he will sleep very well, and you will be the ones who have to wake up tomorrow in a hold that has been told its own founding was a theft. He was crying. He did not wipe his face. He was 81 years old, and he stood in front of a map he had spent his life defending, and he wept in front of 400 people without once putting his hand up to his eyes. I did not do it, he said, but I knew, my father knew. I have known since I was 19 years old, and I have carried it every day since, and I would have carried it into the ground for you, and I would do it again. He looked at me. Now put me out. I have earned it. And I stood there with the whole hold looking at me, and I did not know what to do. I want you to understand that. There was no thunder in me, no righteousness. I looked at the man who taught me my letters standing in tears in the middle of my hall, and I understood that he had spent 60 years doing a terrible thing out of love, and that he was not a villain, and that he was wrong, and that both of those were true at the same time and would be true forever, and there was no road in my head that went anywhere good. I did not know what to do. And Morena said, "May I?" She was still standing at the trestle with the lamp in her hand. "You have not said her name," she said to Sarek. "In all of that, you have talked about the hold and the comfort and what people can carry. You have not once said the name of the woman in the boat." "I do not know it," said Sarek. "It was scraped." "You know it," said Morena. "It is in the ledger you did not know I would read. Your great-great-grandfather wrote it in the margin when he paid for the silence, because he could not help it, because you are chroniclers and you write things down." She held the little book up. "Shall I read it, or will you say it?" The old man's mouth moved. He said it. It went out across that hall in a cracked whisper from an 81-year-old throat, 400 years late. And it is the only time in my life I have heard a hall of 400 people not breathe. And Gert stood up. He had been lying under the high table in front of the black chair, where he had lain every night of his life, and his mother before him and hers before her. And he got up stiff, old, 14 winters, with his gray muzzle low, and he walked out into the middle of that hall, through the crowd which opened for him, and he went to Morena, and he lay down at her feet on the flagstones, and he put his head down and he sighed. Ilse came and lay down beside him. And then a thing happened that I did not order and could not have ordered, and would not have dared to ask for. A rope-maker's wife knelt down. Not to me, not to Morena. She knelt down beside the trestle where the road map lay, an old woman with a cap in her red hands, and she put her palm flat on the corner of the hide, on the scraped place, on the ghost of the letters, and she said the name. And then a fisher knelt and did the same, and then the boy who kept the winter gate. And then, one by one, and then in a great slow wave, 400 people came past that table and put a hand on the corner of a 400-year-old map and said a woman's name out loud, and the sound of it went round and round that hall like water in a cup, and the fires burned, and Morena stood in the middle of it with her ink-black hands over her mouth and wept. Sarek came last. He put his old paper hand on the corner and he said her name, and he did not look at me, and then he went out of the hall and up to his room and wrote it down. It is in the Chronicle. He wrote 9 pages that night, and the 9th page begins, "And I was wrong, and I knew, and I was wrong." I did not put him out. He served 4 more years, and he taught Morena the hold's hand, and she taught him what the light does across a scraped skin, and when he died she sat with him and she closed his eyes. That is not the ending. That is only what happened. The ending was the chair. Because at the end of that night, when the hall was thinning and the fires were dying down, and the road map was going back down the stair in 4 men's arms, the council came to me, quietly, in a knot, the way councils do, and the eldest of them said what they had all agreed to say, which was, "My king crowned her." And they meant it kindly. They meant it as the great gift, the final justice, the thing that would make the whole thing tidy. Make her Luna, put her in the chair, give her the name. 400 years of a woman scraped out of a book, and here at last was the hold ready to write her back in our hand, in our ink, with our crown on her head, and everyone would go to bed feeling that a wrong had been put right. I looked across the hall at her. She was standing by the trestle in her traveling clothes with the case on her back. She had never once unpacked it in 9 days. I had watched her not unpack it. And she was talking to a fisher's little boy about the shoal at Kettleness, drawing the 2 banks in the ale spill on the table with her finger, and the child was watching her hands. And I understood what they were about to do to her. They were going to take the woman who had spent 11 years being nobody's kin and no house's daughter, and give her a house and a name and a crown, and it would be given. And every gift is a leash if you do not get to refuse it. And she would be Torvald's Luna forever, and the map would be a story about a king who was fair. "No," I said. I went to her through the emptying hall, and the wolves came with me, and she looked up. "They want to crown you," I said. "I know," she said, "I heard." "I am not going to." Something in her face went very still. "Morena," I said, "I have never been lost in my life, not once. Blind in fog in the dark, I always know the way. It is the only thing I have ever had that was mine." My voice was not steady, and I let it not be. "And 9 nights ago you sat down in a chair, and every road in my head turned round and pointed at you, and it has not moved since, and it never will. I know where you are at every hour of the day. I will know it when I am 80. That is what has happened to me, and I am not asking you to do anything about it, and I am not putting it on you as a debt." She did not speak. "They will tell you to sit in the chair," I said, "and they will tell you it is yours, and it is yours, and I do not want you to sit in it because a hall of 400 people has decided you should. You have had 400 years of other people deciding where your line sits." I held out my hand. There was a pen in it, a plain one, iron-nibbed from the chart-room. "You told me nobody wants to be slow," I said. "So be slow. Take a year, take 5. Go and finish Kettleness, go and draw the whole gray water, every gut and every bank, and be nobody's kin and no man's Luna, and put your own name on the bottom of it in your own hand, where it can never be scraped because there will be 400 copies. And then, if you want to, come back." She looked at the pen for a long time. "And if I do not come back?" "Then I will know exactly where you are," I said, "for the rest of my life, and I will not come, because a needle that only points one way is not a claim on the north." I could hardly say it. "It is only a needle." She took the pen out of my hand, and then she reached past me to the trestle, and pulled a clean hide toward her, and dipped and drew quickly, roughly. The way she did everything with a pen in her hand, the gray water, the whole coast of it in about 90 seconds from memory, the drowned coast, Kettleness with its 2 banks and its gut, the tide gut at Vesgard Head. And in the middle of it, on the harbor, she drew a small square hall with 2 wolves at the door. And then she signed it. In the bottom corner, in her own ink-black hand, her whole name, which she had never once put on a chart she sold because a chart with a woman's name on it fetches less. She turned it round and pushed it across the boards to me. 5 years, she said. Her voice was going. "I will be 40. I will be weather-beaten, and I will have ruined my eyes, and I will not be a gentle thing to bring into a hall. Morena. And you will be old," she said, "and there will still be a chair, and I would like—" She stopped and pressed her wrist against her mouth and made herself say it. "I would like it very much if nobody sat in it." "Nobody will sit in it," I said. She went at the end of the week, when the road came up out of the water. I walked her to the winter gate as I had promised, and I did not send a letter, and the whole hold came out into the yard to see her go, and the rope-maker's wife gave her a cap. She came back. That is not the ending either, though it is the part everyone wants. And it is true, she came back. 4 years and 7 months later, with the gray water finished and her name on the bottom of it and her eyes half ruined, exactly as she had said. There are 200 copies of that chart in the gray water now, and there will be 1,000. And there is not a boat between here and the drowned coast that does not carry her lines, and the shoal at Kettleness has taken no one in 9 years. She was slow. It is not clever, it is only slow. But that is not the ending, because an ending should be a small thing. So the chair. She does not sit in it every night. That was the bargain, and I have kept it, and I will keep it. And there are evenings when she is down in the chart room until the fires are gray, and I eat my supper with an empty seat at my left hand and 2 wolves in front of it, and the hold thinks nothing of it, because it is hers to sit in and hers to leave empty, and that is the entire difference between a gift and a crown. But on the nights she comes up, she comes in late and cold with the ink on her fingers, and the hall is loud, and she crosses behind the high table without a word to anybody. And she puts one hand on my shoulder as she passes, just that, the flat of a cold, black-stained hand on the shoulder of the King of Vestgard, in front of the whole hold, without asking, without being asked. And she sits down. And every road in my head, all of them, every one I have ever had, and every one I will ever have, go quiet and lie flat and stay.